In-expect po natin after lunch bukas magsisimula na po yung tinatawag nating exodus ng ating mga pasahero pa-uwi ng probinsya. Opo, tayo po ay full deployment. Bawal pong mag-absent at mag-leave ang ating mga tauhan. Ang ating po mga enforcers ay nakahanda at mag-duty po hanggang sa gabi para to ensure na yung traffic ay maayos at yung ating po mga pasahero ay convenient.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Sean Yao.
And I'm Angela Lagunzad. The big story tonight.
The Asian Development Bank sees the Philippines in healthy expansion mode despite record high inflation and external risks. The multilateral lender expects the country to grow 6% this year, an outlook that has remained unchanged since they revised figures downward in December of last year. The ADB's projection falls at the lower end of the government's 6 to 7% growth target range for 2023. Next year, the ADB sees the Philippine economy growing faster at 6.2%. But what exactly is driving this bullish forecast? Well, the ADB cited continuous recovery in the labor market, as well as growth in retail, trade, and manufacturing. It also noted the Philippines' strong growth momentum in infrastructure spending. The Marcos administration earlier approved over 100 infrastructure projects worth 9 trillion pesos.
Despite this good news, inflationary pressures remain, with OPEC and its allies agreeing to cut production by at least 1 million barrels per day. OPEC said the move is meant as a precautionary measure to support market stability. Before this, oil prices in the world market have actually gone down amid weak demand. But now, the production cut is expected to push oil prices back up. The surprise cut has since pushed prices up by $5 a barrel. Some projections expect this to go up to $10 soon. The Energy Department says it's possible this could lead to oil price hikes in the weeks ahead.
And to give us an idea how these external developments will impact us here in the Philippines, we have RCBC Chief Economist Mike Ricafort joining us over Zoom. Mike, good evening and welcome back to The Big Story. ADB has kept its forecast on the Philippines pretty bullish. They've kept it unchanged. Is this something to celebrate, or could we perhaps see a downward adjustment moving forward?
Well, at least that's something relatively positive or optimistic, in the sense that despite the relatively higher inflation and higher interest rates due to the Fed rate hikes to better manage inflation. So, and of course, the risk of U.S. recession due to the aggressive Fed rate hikes to effectively bring down inflation. So, well, that's something, it still shows the resilience of the country because of the attractive demographics as the economy reopened towards greater normalcy. So, if you look at the metrics, so no more restrictions. In fact, since the latter part of October, the wearing of masks is optional, and all systems go. The missing elements of the recovery, they're back on track, like tourism, especially foreign tourism. In fact, the group tours from China already resumed since the latter part of January as China reopened its economy since December. And of course, the economic reopening narrative in China, which is the world's second biggest economy, that would definitely help. Also, the global economic growth. Of course, the challenges remain the relatively higher prices or inflation, but in the coming months, year-on-year inflation is expected to decelerate. And well, actually, that's related to global oil prices also. That's why OPEC just made this surprise cut in production output by more than 1 million barrels per day, because that's a sign of actually being defensive, because oil prices have gone down sharply. Well, in fact, it came from the lowest since December of 2021, the lowest in 15 months. It reached NYMEX oil reached around 65 barrels per day. Imagine the peak of oil at the start of the early part of the Russia-Ukraine war, March 7 of 2022, more than a year ago. The peak was $130. So imagine it reached just half of that, just $64 to $65. That's the reason why OPEC Plus just decided to cut output to be on the defensive, because oil prices have been on a declining trend. Of course, it's never an assurance also that oil prices would go up in a sustainable manner. We have seen this episode in the past couple of months where they have tried cutting output, but nonetheless, the underlying downward correction or the downward trend in oil still persisted. But of course, it's really just to also, it's really to combat speculators, those who make short sales on oil and try to make money by shorting oil. So they're trying to burn them and teach them a lesson and not to unduly speculate, because of course they're also protecting their revenues, of course, in their for their respective countries, especially those that really depend on oil for
Right.
their major source of for their spending on various infrastructure and other government spending in their respective
Yes.
countries.
But ADB cited labor services and infra spending as the main drivers of this growth, no? But do you see sustainable growth in these factors or sectors rather?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true, Angela, because infrastructure spending, that's a bright spot of the economy. It has been sustained at more than 5% of GDP. This is far higher compared, if you look 10, 20 years back, it's just less than 2% of GDP. And during the pandemic, this has been a steady source of growth and going forward as well. And as well as of course, the trickle-down effects in terms of job creation. The path of these infrastructure projects would also create pockets of growth, well, say the various toll roads, the expansion of airport projects, and so on. That would also attract more foreign direct investments, and as well as increase and improve the mobility and the movement of workers, tourists, and as well as goods and services, both exports and imports. So yeah, that's one bright spot. Also, the labor data, jobs data among the best since the pandemic started. Unemployment rate at 4% levels lately. In fact, it even came from the lowest or the best levels in 17 years. Well, because of the reopening narrative of the economy that effectively overshadowed, the offsetting risk factors like higher prices or inflation, higher interest rates, the risk of recession in the U.S. and other headwinds. So well, of course, on top of the other bright spots, we have a very attractive demographics. More than 110 million Filipinos, the 12th largest in the world. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, I'm going to bring this back to the OPEC Plus production cut that was announced this week. Now, if we can look back, they already cut production back in October of 2022. And a lot of the inflation that the whole world, not just the Philippines, is feeling now, this is a lot because of oil prices after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Now, the International Energy Agency, I'm going to quote them, they said that these production cuts could be the tipping point that pushes the world into recession. What would you have to say about that statement from the IEA?
Yeah, let's see in the coming days if indeed, now the NYMEX crude oil price is at $81. That's the highest in more than 2 months since January 27 of this year. So we ended the year 2022 at a little over $80 per barrel. So it's just $1 higher. It has really declined to a low of $64 to $65 just a few days ago. So yeah, that's why considering that the peak or the highest was $130, and the start of the war, of the Russia-Ukraine war, it was at 92. It's still lower by about $12 since then. So practically all the increase of global oil price has been erased since the war started, it goes to show also because it may have to do with demand and supply. The higher prices of oil effectively also reduce the demand, the curtailing of demand, and of course the shift to renewables. But yeah, going forward, this move, we have yet to see if the upward correction would be sustained, because so far we're just back to the familiar ranges, as you pointed out, because when they did their last cuts since late last year, so it's just trying to smoothen the underlying downward trend at the very least. So, well, hopefully the inflation would still be, the year-on-year inflation would be on a downward trend, because at least we have seen the worst already. In fact,
all right. Thank you so much, as usual, for the chat and for the insights. Mike Ricafort, RCBC's chief economist. Thanks for your time. And the Philippines and China are moving forward on the proposed joint oil and gas exploration in the West Philippine Sea, a result of the consensus signed by the two countries after President Bongbong Marcos' state visit to Beijing last January. The Foreign Affairs Department said that the Philippines and Chinese officials will be meeting in Beijing next month to restart negotiations. DFA Secretary Enrique Manalo said that the talks will be at the technical level and maritime officers will be present. This meeting will focus on the terms of reference and the issues that need to be tackled before formal negotiations. Secretary Manalo assured that they will update the Senate regarding this issue. Senator Francis Tolentino had said that the Senate should be involved in negotiations since it is an extension of the country's foreign policy.
Meanwhile, 4 new locations under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement or EDCA have been identified. Maricel Halili with the details.
Philippine and U.S. troops will soon have more facilities for security and defense in the country. Malacanang earlier named the 4 locations being considered as additional sites under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA. These are the Camilo Osias Naval Base and Lalo Airport in Cagayan, Camp Melchor de la Cruz in Camu Isabela, and Balabac Island in Palawan. In total, the Philippines will have 9 EDCA sites once the facilities are constructed in the 4 additional locations. The administration has been very clear that these sites will not be used as bases by the U.S. military, but some local officials remain opposed to the agreement.
Mas malaking ihamak ang positive if we connect ourselves to our neighbors, especially China. Amerikano, wala, kuripot pa. Ang layo pa sa atin.
For the Philippine Army, the expanded base access provides an opportunity to improve the country's military facilities.
Malaking tulong yon because of course, we have to admit, walang tayo sa pondo but they can provide the funds para sa improvement ng ating kampo na mutually pwedeng gamitin.
While there are some economic benefits to having additional EDCA sites, one expert believes that long-term security risks must be taken into consideration.
Of course, China will not take that very lightly. China is, in fact, in my opinion, viewing the approval of the Philippine government to allow the expansion of EDCA as an utter betrayal of their bilateral understanding made during the January 2023 visit of President Bongbong.
Banlawi adds that the location for the EDCA sites were strategically chosen to prepare the U.S. for any military contingency in the Indo-Pacific region.
If there will be military confrontations between the United States and China, surely the Philippines will be involved in a war, and we will be the target of military attack of China. We hope that China and the United States will not go to armed conflict.
Amid all the different views on EDCA, the Department of Foreign Affairs believes that the Philippines will greatly benefit from these additional sites. Strengthening the country's defense capabilities is among them. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
Former Senator Richard Gordon says that President Bongbong Marcos should not fear the coup rumors and destabilization plots that may arise following his decision to reform the pension of retired military and uniformed personnel. On One News's The Chiefs, Gordon emphasized that the Marcos administration needs to spark the conversation on pension reforms. The former senator likewise eased concerns of a possible coup against Marcos.
All the leaders of Congress, the President, our financial advisors should sit down with the military, rank and file, and tell them this is the situation. And they're reasonable men. Makakaintindi naman yan. Hindi dahil natatakot tayo mag-coup. Mag-coup kayo, you'll gain the opprobrium of the whole world. Hindi na uso yan, hindi na rules-based yan eh. Look at Macron, he's standing his ground. Look at Netanyahu. Di ba? Hindi bumibigay. It's all confrontational lang ngayon ang mundo.
After the break, passenger volume continues to increase in airports as more and more Filipinos are set to begin their Holy Week break. We'll get the latest on this when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
watching The Big Story here on One News. Filipinos are used to observing traditional Holy Week practices like fasting or joining the Alay Lakad. Some acts of penitence are even on the extreme side, like crucifixion. But as it turns out, there are simpler ways to express your devotion this Holy Week. Mobile journalist Diana Pascual with the story.
The Filipino faithful have different ways of commemorating the Passion of Christ this Holy Week. But if you still haven't settled on what to do to express your faith, the church says you can start with something simple like fixing of bad attitude. The Catholic Church explains, acts like fasting and abstinence are some Holy Week sacrifices done by the faithful to express gratefulness for Jesus' ultimate sacrifice on the cross. And in this modern age, the Church says, the faithful can start with a simple act of improving their behavior.
Magagawa nila yan sa pamagitan ng pag-give up ng something na alam nila na hindi naman maganda, no? Like for example, masyado silang nakatutok sa gadget, no? So baka pwede naman nila i-give up yun, no, once in a while, no?
The church adds that devotees do not need to participate in extreme acts of penitence like ritual crucifixion. What they can sacrifice instead are bad attitudes like being rude or easily angered.
Ito ay isang napakagandang pagsasakripisyo ng mga pagbibigay natin, pag-give up natin sa mga ugaling ito sa pagbago sa ating mga sarili dahil yun naman talaga ang mensahe ng ating Panginoong Hesus sa atin.
This Holy Week, the Church says it's also important for Filipinos to show their love for others, which can be done through simple acts like helping those in need or spending time with family, friends, and loved ones.
Napakagandang opportunity ang Lent for us to reflect sa ating mga buhay, hindi yung buhay ng iba. No? Para tingnan natin kung ano yung kailangan nating baguhin para maisabuhay natin ang ninanais ng ating Panginoong Hesus para sa atin na tayo ay magmahala, na tayo ay mamuhay na mapayapa at magbibigay ng ginawa sa ating kapwa.
Mobile journalist Diana Pascual, we are One News.
If you're looking for an extraordinary dessert to beat the heat, or the summer heat, look no further than Ugbo Tondo, right in the heart of the city of Manila. This food park in Ugbo is famous for a dessert that is far from the usual, and it's called magic ice cream or smoking balls. The magic ice cream is made out of colorful cereal balls dipped in liquid nitrogen with temperatures reaching up to -100 degrees Celsius. Magic ice cream costs between 150 to 200 pesos. The shop's owner says the concept came from China. Although liquid nitrogen is non-toxic, the US FDA warned that it should not be directly ingested nor allowed direct contact to skin as it can cause severe damage.
Naisip po ng concept na to nung last year, nung husband ko. Kaya po siya lumalamig dahil sa liquid nitrogen.
Pero niyan kasi mababang temperatura. So, syempre, pag alam natin mababang temperatura, sa sobrang lamig, umuusok siya.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump is now in New York for his arraignment over allegations of hush money payments made to an adult film star back in 2016. Trump is set to appear before a Manhattan court to respond to criminal charges, which have not yet been disclosed. The arraignment will not be up for live broadcast after the presiding judge in the case barred the use of cameras during the proceedings. Trump is set to speak in Florida after his arraignment. And despite being the first former United States president to be prosecuted, Trump remains committed to his presidential bid in 2024.
No president in the history of our country has been subjected to such vicious and disgusting attacks. And you think about what we did in 2016, and then we did even better by many millions and millions of votes in 2020, but the election was rigged and stolen. But now we're going to take back our country in 2024.
Right after this quick break, the Supreme Court has affirmed with finality its 2021 decision that the disputed Bonifacio Global City falls under the jurisdiction of Taguig City. More details on that when we return. Keep it here on One News.
You're still watching the big story here on One News.
The Manila International Airport Authority deploys 100 more personnel on this Holy Tuesday as they brace for an influx of passengers this long weekend.
Over 1 million passengers are expected to pass through the NAIA this Holy Week. Camille Samonte joins us live from the NAIA to give us the latest. Camille, what's the situation there this evening?
Angela, Sean, the queue for the check-in counter and immigration counter for international flights are now starting to build up. Most passengers that we have spoken to still prefer to do the check-in manually. But of course, ideally, if you don't have baggages that you need to check in, some airlines and flights are also allowing the passengers to do the check-in online. Sean, Angela?
All right, one issue of late, Camille, especially when it comes to air travel, is these long lines at immigration, especially now that you're in Terminal 3. That's the terminal where they say sometimes there's only 2 or 3 immigration personnel. Is that still the case tonight, Camille?
Right now in front of me, I'm in front of the immigration counter, but almost all of the counters are now open. But since there are many flights right now off to United Kingdom, Kuwait, Bangkok around 11 and 12 a.m., the line are really long right now. And but as I can see, there are also airport personnel and BI assisting those passengers who are lining up to prepare the documents needed. Sean, Angela?
Yeah, are there any other airport improvements this Holy Week?
Yes, Angela, aside from arranging the process inside the terminal, and added personnel, of course, the Department of Tourism also made some interior changes, specifically in Terminal 2. The agency changed some furnitures and added decorations made of rattan to make it more pleasing for the arriving tourists and, of course, most especially to the foreigners who will be traveling here in the country.
All right, and usually, Camille, people will say, go to the airport like 5 hours in advance or 2 hours in advance. Has airport management given us an idea of how long before our flights that people should be in the airport this Holy Week?
Yes, Sean, normally they would say that at least you have to be here at the airport 4 hours before your flight if you're flying international, and then 3 hours if it's a domestic flight. But since we also have to think about the traffic also going here to the airport. So some passengers that I've spoken to even arrive here at 2 p.m. even if their flight is 11:40 p.m. So right now, as we can see, the check-in counter, the line for the check-in counter is still very long. So, but most passengers are allotting more than 5 to 6 hours of their time just to make sure that they won't miss their flight. Sean, Angela?
All right, one last question, Camille. The MIAA has reassigned terminals for certain airline-specific flights. Was there any confusion that was caused by this reshuffling to passengers that might have not heard of those updates?
So for Angela, the passengers that I have spoken to didn't really have any confusion with regards to the changes of terminal, because even before their fly, from the time that they check in online or they get a booking confirmation from their email, it is already stated which terminal they will have to go to check in and from which immigration counter that they have to go to. Sean, Angela?
All right, thank you, Camille Samonte, reporting to us live from NAIA Terminal 3. The Supreme Court affirmed its 2021 decision declaring the 729-hectare Bonifacio Global City Complex, as well as several barangays in Makati City, as under the jurisdiction of the Taguig City government. In its resolution, the SC Special 3rd Division denied the motion for reconsideration, filed by the Makati City government seeking the reversal of its December 1, 2021 ruling favoring the Taguig City government in the territorial dispute case. The SC also rejected the motion of Makati City to submit the case to the court en banc since it is not an appellate court where they can appeal. Taguig City has since welcomed the decision, saying that the end of the legal dispute marks the beginning of a new chapter for Taguig and its people.
President Bongbong Marcos will attend the coronation of King Charles III in London. The palace confirms that the President Marcos and First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos have been invited to attend the historic ceremony. The coronation of King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla will be held at Westminster Abbey on May 6. President Marcos and the First Lady have also been invited to the reception, which will be held on the eve of the coronation. This will be Marcos's 11th foreign trip since taking office as president in June last year.
And before we go, Vogue Philippines recently revealed Apo Whang-od on the cover of its April issue, a move that makes the 106-year-old tattoo artist the oldest person ever to appear on Vogue magazine. On the Vogue Philippines cover, Apo Whang-od proudly showed off the tattoos covering her arms and chest, including symbolic patterns of accomplishments, ailments, and names of her past lovers. Prior to her appearance in Vogue Philippines, the record for the oldest Vogue cover model was held by actress Judi Dench, who appeared on British Vogue in 2020 at the age of 85. Whang-od's Vogue cover has since been recognized by several celebrities, including Filipino-American comedian Jokoy and Oscar-winning actress Halle Berry. And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analyses. I'm Sean Yao.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Angela Lagunzad. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.